Okay, we have Marie Sarmiento from Yelp. We have Eric Irving from Oak Street Health. We have Ankit Vyasha from Allstate. And actually, I know that recently, Ankit, you just moved on to another company. So we're excited to see you here and tell us about your new company that you're working at. Laboria, she unfortunately was unable to make it. She had a work commitment that came up. And so we're very sorry that she can't make it. She might join if she has some time, but if not, we have plenty of questions that Nick Phillips will help us out with from Studio 2133. So thank you so much, Nick, for taking over.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicholas Phillips. Like Carmelina mentioned, I am a product designer at Studio 2133. So we kind of focus on physical products and have a lot of work around human-centered design and design research. So I wanted to start off the panel with introduction. So we'll have everyone go around and introduce themselves, their name, as well as a fun fact, or potentially, one of their favorite design-related media, whether or not it's a book, a podcast, a movie show, TikTok influencer. We'll go ahead and start with that. And so let's start with Marie.
Hey everybody, you gotta excuse me, my voice is a little bit hoarse. I'm coming down with a cold. But anyways, my name is Marie Sarmiento. I'm really excited to be here. I am a senior product manager at Yelp based out of Chicago. I've been in product management for over 10 years at companies like Grubhub, ActiveCampaign, Chowbus, a couple more. Really excited to chat with you about product and give my perspective on that. I think my favorite podcast is probably 100 Product Managers. I listen to that pretty often, but fun fact about me outside of that is I actually did product at a church. So I did like a Google design sprint on how to figure out like the layout and how to do the curriculum for a church. So you can do product in just about every scenario. That's me.
Awesome. Next, we will have Eric.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Irving. I am based in Chicago, currently working for Oak Street Health as a senior UX designer. I've been in design for about 8 years or so. Started out in graphic design, moved forward on through to product, UI, UX, and that whole gamut of things. Worked at a wide range of companies from tiny startups with 7 people to global corporations with more than 10,000 employees. A fun fact about me is that one time at a UX conference in a workshop I was in, I wound up working with one of the lead product people who helped develop Clippy for Microsoft. And someone I never thought I'd meet. And that was just really fun conversation.
Okay, and then next we have Ankit.
Hey everyone, my name's Ankit Vaishya. I am currently working as a senior UX designer at Erie Insurance. I just recently moved on from Allstate. I'm based out of New York City. I also used to be in Chicago, so I miss all of the folks or being close to everyone that's on the call from Chicago. And a fun fact about me, so I guess not fun, but I grew up in Bombay, India, which is where I spent the majority of my life, and moved on to the States in 2008. I've also, and just one other thing, I've worked in banking and insurance mainly. I've also worked at Hyatt, HSBC, Allstate, and now Erie Insurance.
Awesome. Thank you. And I forgot to mention, but so kind of the session topic today is going to be going over kind of like industry insights from the tech industry. So as you can see, there's like a wide range of experience, industries, size of companies, backgrounds with the panel. And so we're basically going to be picking their brains on how they kind of navigate the role and any of the insights they might have for us when it comes to working as a creative professional at various levels. So kind of the first question I want to ask for everyone on the panel is how does product design and engineering work closely together and collaborate at your company? And we can start with Marie.
Sure. before we get into how we collaborate, I think it's really important to talk about like the foundation of collaboration. So in order for successful collaboration, we really need to have an environment and a safe space of where there's a lot of trust in the team. So I think one of the most important characteristics of building a strong team that feels safe to be able to collaborate well is to be able to create those relationships within the team and know each other has the ability to talk through whatever their opinion is, even if it's differing from someone else. So I think that that's always where I like to go and where I like to start in terms of collaboration. But then the next key part of collaboration is understanding, like, why are we here? What problem are we trying to solve? What are we collaborating about? Because really digging deep into the why, I think helps unlock those creative juices to really think through how do we want to solve a problem and how can we work with one another to figure out different ways to solve the problem and then ultimately come together for the best solution, putting all these great ideas together. And then from the how perspective, we're all in a distributed environment, most of us today, right? I haven't been in an office in, I don't know, 2.5 years at this point. I used to be the one who had sticky notes on me every time and post-it notes. Can't do that anymore because all my team is all across the country. So finding different ways to really facilitate that collaboration. My team uses Figma Jam. We use Slack Huddle a lot. Really depending on, do we want to have a one-on-one collaboration? Do we want to have, a group collaboration? That really defines like what tools we use. So I think, at the crux of it all is like, as long as we understand, like, we can all trust one another and we know what we're collaborating about, I think that's really what brings the best collaboration out of everyone.
Awesome. Next, let's go to Ankit.
By the way, I really like that answer, and I want to echo a similar, that trust that comes from humility and building rapport with your team. I think that leads to a common understanding amongst your teammates in general, designers or developers. And that's something I try to do, especially when I'm joining a new project or a team. It's just to spend time with different, team members and introduce myself, but also try and spend some time with them, understand their work. I think it's always beneficial, and it leads to a common, or like an alignment in the goal that we're trying to achieve as a team. In my current role, I usually have weekly design syncs with my product manager and the engineering lead, where I'm making sure I'm in sync with them and aligned with the goal of product and engineering, my engineering counterpart. So those are some of the things that I found successful in working closely with non-designers, and just things that have been helpful to me.
Could you dig a little into kind of how that's changed at your various companies and what as well?
Yeah, so
among them?
yeah, happy to. I've been part of teams where I was the sole designer, and the team consisted of say 8 to 10 people, and I found it easier to work in a small close-knit group because we didn't need to have virtual meetings, or there was a sense of close-knit or alignment amongst us, where even if the requirements of a certain feature were changed, we'd be able to like get on the same page sooner, as opposed to a team that is, more than 20, 30 people, because I think it just takes a lot more time to coordinate efforts amongst bigger groups of people as opposed to smaller ones. So through the course of my UX career, the past 5 or 6 years, I'd say it has varied based on the size of the team, the maturity of the team. And usually like a team that's worked together, I think they're able to problem solve and pivot sooner, as opposed to a team that's still nascent, still kind of finding their stride. But yeah, that's been my experience.
Excellent. And Eric, yeah, so how does product design and engineering work closely together and collaborate at your various companies?
I
experience.
think to start off, like echoing what Marie and Ankit said about kind of setting up that environment for collaboration, you want to have like psychological safety within your team and this understanding of there aren't any bad ideas happening here. We all bring different experiences to the table. We all have a different sort of base knowledge that we're bringing from, whether we're product, dev, design, or from outside that practice, even from a user base or a stakeholder base. We all have different pieces of the puzzle that we bring to the table. And something that has been really helpful is getting in on that collaboration process and building that mentality through teams up early. So like from a design perspective, there's a lot of times in the past at some places I've worked where it's a lot more like, all right, I'm going to design it, hand it over to dev. And then, you know, the rest is on their plate to build. And where I'm at now, it's a lot more like, all right, cool. We've done some initial research. We've done some digging in with product and business requirements. We've also talked with our user base and figured out, you know, what do they want out of this? What problems are they running into that we can solve for? And then sort of ideating on those together, bringing early sketches or very lo-fi blocked out wireframes to dev, allowing dev to work on technical design of some potential solutions that are being worked through. So that way, like they can come back to us and say, you know, here's sort of the differences that are happening between these solutions. Here's what it's going to mean for the scope. Here's what it's going to mean for the time. Here are those other dependencies. And allowing that to be explored for a couple solutions early on helps prevent bottlenecking later on when it's like, here's the solution we're going to go with. And then you run into an issue that it can't be built for whatever reason. So it really kind of keeps things open and it keeps that free flowing of information and ideas between teams together, which allows that process to feel a lot more fluid instead of really being locked in on like, this is our solution. And it really gets a deeper understanding of the problem from different angles.
No, yeah, I really love that as well. I feel like when everyone is on the same page, it really does help it go further down the line instead of keeping everything siloed. So it's nice to hear that's happening. Kind of shifting gears to the next question. This one's for Ankit, specifically around agile methodologies. At your company, how do you work together using agile methodologies? Yeah, we'll start there.
Yeah. So to me, agile methodologies, prescriptively, they're just the ceremonies. You have a stand-up, you have a retro. Those, obviously, like those are part of working within agile, but then there's meetings within or that are not part of agile that I think are valuable in not just the designer working closely with the devs, but the designer also making sure they're aligned with the product owner every step of the way. There are, even within retros, and this is my experience with the new team that I'm working on, I initially sensed some hesitation in people not wanting to, you know, bring up things that didn't go well. And I think that was just because everyone was still new. No one wanted to kind of surface things that didn't go well. I think I had to kind of, you know, be that person that, even though it's unpleasant, maybe to some people it's unpleasant to hear, but bring up certain things that ideally didn't go as planned in the last sprint, and have that be an action item. So I definitely see the value of those traditional agile meetings that we have, from the stand-up, which is just daily check-ins, to the retros. But even outside of those standard ceremonies, there is a lot of value in making sure you check in with the team members that you're closely working with, whether it be a BA or the devs. That is, and I think I heard someone else mention this, it usually do it early and often so that you avoid the just backing yourself up in a corner. So regular cadence meetings with different disciplines definitely is something I found to be useful.
Nice, thank you. I kind of want to ask you to dive in a little bit into how you're kind of creating that safe space. Eric kind of mentioned this as well with collaboration. So kind of encouraging people to take ownership and accountability throughout the process, you know, sooner than later, you know, so we prevent bottlenecking. It sounded like in your instance, you took the lead and set the example of like, hey, like in my past week, this is something that kind of held me up, went wrong, so people could feel comfortable. Are there any other tactics or things you might do early on in the process to kind of help foster that? And then Eric and Marie, if you have any thoughts on that as well, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from other people on this too. I don't know if I have any tactics. I think, and just reflecting on my most recent experience of, bringing stuff up in a retro that didn't go ideally. There was some folks did get defensive, and I think it was important for us to acknowledge that it's not just putting the blame on one faction of the project. It's all of us combined together, because that's what we're working towards. So if you weren't able to get something done in time, that was a symptom. We want to figure out, what led to that happening, and ideally try to avoid something like that happening again in the future. So as long as there's no finger pointing or blaming a certain, team, at the end of that meeting, we all kind of walked away thinking that that was a productive discussion, because there wasn't any finger pointing, or it was more like, hey, we need to do better about this. And how do we do better about this? Is kind of coming up with some ideas and making sure like things are aligned when we want to hand requirements off to our development team. Just an example. But yeah, creating that safe space is, it comes from having like a close-knit culture of like, we're a team, and if we work together, we fail together, we succeed together.
Yeah, I can't help but echo everything that you just said, Ankit. I think one of the things that I always like to do is really stress to the team that, when things are not going well, we have to talk about it, because if we continue to ignore it, if we continue to sweep it under the rug, we're never going to fix that problem, right? So whether it's a process issue or whether it's like misunderstanding of requirements, whatever that thing is, like we need to actually like just attack it full force head on and talk through it. And I've always noticed there's people who are hesitant to really talk through what that problem is. And, I'll do a lot of behind the scenes type of discussions, one-on-one discussions with people to kind of get them comfortable talking to me, and then get them to a position where they're comfortable talking in a group environment. Because I understand not everybody wants to just like come out and say, okay, this is what's wrong. So it's again, going back to relationship building and making everybody feel safe to be heard and to speak their voice.
Yeah, adding on top of those things as well, I think a big part of it too is just like overall confidence that people have, and helping people build up their confidence. I think especially like when I'm newer at a job, like imposter syndrome sets in every time. Doesn't matter what the new job is. But I think allowing people to sort of understand that like, they've been hired because they are the expert at what they do in this case. They're on this project because they know what they're doing. I'm a big fan of reminding myself that like, I know more than I think I do at times when I'm not feeling confident. And that really kind of sticks with me. I think it's also like allowing people the autonomy to do the work that they have to solve the problem, allowing them to sort of dig in and explore ideas, to sort of take things on their own and follow different leads and research, and really like allow them to not just like tell them that they're the expert at what they're doing, but allow them to feel that they are the expert at what they're doing, and let them be heard in situations. And I think it's also this understanding that like every solution that gets implemented is just, it's going to solve things, but it's going to create new problems. And I think it's this understanding, like it's just this constant learning experience, and like allowing for those mistakes to be made, allowing for things to be learned from, and allowing, being able to foster your team's confidence is really going to help with that environment as well.
Awesome, thank you. Kind of the next question I have is, where does product land within your organization? So this is probably not the clearest or the best way to explain it, but in terms of hierarchy, like, is product and design kind of the champion? Is it marketing? Is it engineering? Is it business? And throughout your various roles, how have you seen that change? So let's start with Marie, on that question.
Yeah, sure. So currently at Yelp, product is its own organization. We have a CPO, we have multiple VPs of product, and under that we have group product managers, senior product managers, and then product managers. So there's a very well-defined structure of the product organization at Yelp. I've definitely been at other companies where it's kind of a free-for-all. I come from a startup world. I've worked a lot of really small companies where product is still trying to kind of find their place in the organization. Sometimes it has rolled up into technology, sometimes product, there's like a product leader, not necessarily a CPO, that rolls up into the CEO. It really is different. And with that difference of small to big company, it actually changes the role of product manager, right? So at the smaller companies, you're definitely wearing a lot more hats, right? So everything from doing just product, you're doing also project management, you're doing Scrum Master, you're doing sales enablement, you're doing training, you're doing user research, you're doing all of those things. As you go to a larger company where there are more defined roles and they're subject matter experts doing things like sales enablement and user research. For me, it's been pretty humbling because I've always been, running 100 miles an hour, doing 15 million things, and to see that there is, someone who's focused specifically on a particular craft. That's been humbling to me to be able to learn from others, things that I've just kind of had to wear an extra hat being in smaller startup companies. So I know the question was specifically around like, where does product fit, but it's not so much for me in terms of how I've seen my career trajectory and how I've moved around different companies. It's not so much where product is that has really defined how decisions are made and things like that. It's actually more of the responsibilities and the size of the responsibilities of the product manager, and then the size of the company that really dictates like how much influence product has within the company in general and making decisions.
Awesome, thank you. Eric, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think similar to kind of like how my current setup is with product, we really have our own structure defined in my current position. And it's really kind of cool just because, we have a lot of power to make decisions and we kind of all work collaboratively. I've seen it kind of really vary from company to company, even like, like large companies that I've worked at have had a very different understanding of what product is from another large company. There have been ones where it's like, all right, we're hiring a UX designer, and it's like, oh, you're also going to be the UI specialist, and we've got some marketing design that needs work, and then we're going to have you on site at this photo shoot helping out. And it's like you run this whole gamut where like product is not just product in certain spaces. And there was one place I worked in particular, this was a few years ago now, but when I started there, like our product team was very small. There was me and 2 other designers that started on it. And then we sort of added 2 more designers over time. But I think what started to happen on the products we were working on and creating, we kind of started to become known as like the team that gets things done. And we had the tools within our small team to sort of pass things around that other teams might struggle with, that maybe teams who didn't have design or research on them. So instead of just being tied to this one product, we started becoming more central. And I think like that was in a very, very large global company. And I think being in a company like that when that shift happened was really fascinating, because all of a sudden we went from like talking to a few people here and there to like, oh, the VP of the entire company wants to meet with us about product and like the future of it and what we're doing on it. And then you sort of got to see this process of product design and dev, like getting more seats at the table, getting their voices in there, and like seeing that sort of maturity build and the evolution of product decision making. And that's something that's really like come forward now where I'm at, and sort of having the structure that is already set up. And, there's always struggles with it, but I think it's really nice to sort of get experience at different levels of product, like culture maturity.
Awesome, thank you. One question I had was, Marie, it sounds like at Yelp product early on was given a seat at the table, or like there's a very like top-down approach. And I feel like in other organizations, say like a startup or smaller team, design kind of needs to like fight for its seat at the seat at the table. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that or strategies when you're navigating your various roles, how you can maintain that, or do people not even care that product is its own silo? Do they still just treat you as the people who push pixels, for instance? You know, I love your thoughts.
So kind of similar to what Eric said earlier, like a lot of people don't even know what product is, what product does. So one of the most important things is to really educate all your stakeholders in terms of like, this is what we do, this is why it's important what we do, this is why it's important we work together and we partner together. So I think the main thing to be able to like get a seat at the table is really to, one, align on what your stakeholders think product does, and then tell them if it's not really that aligned with that, then explain like why we provide value, how we work together, and then make the strides to make sure that we are coming at some type of like quarterly cadence, monthly cadence, whatever it is. We're coming together as a stakeholder team, including product. So I've basically like invented meetings to bring all stakeholders together to make sure I have a seat at the table. So if the seat at the table doesn't exist, like find a way to make it exist, whether it's you individually, a product manager working on a specific project, or whether it's like making sure that your product organization in your company gets a seat at the table. It's just kind of like inserting yourself into it.
Awesome, thank you. Before moving on, I was wondering, Ankit, did you have any thoughts on that question? Where does product land within your design organization?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was learning for me too, because I love hearing from Marie and Eric. I think right now in my current setup, product rolls up the technology. It's not an ideal setup. I think a lot of people are still kind of, and right now the company is also seeing a lot of churn. So people are being cross-trained, but it's nice because all of us are learning to lean on each other a little bit more. Like our product manager, who was previously a business analyst, is kind of entrusting of certain things and wants my opinion. So it ends up being a very collaborative team anyway, because we're all like learning and leaning on each other. But yeah, I've experienced different kinds of setup where design or just product didn't have a seat at the table, and then by me being the sole de facto designer, I was forced to be on the table because not that I'm complaining, it was nice, but yeah, I was in these meetings with C-suite executives kind of giving us requirements, but there was a healthy push and pull in terms of like, hey, this, you know, if we're thinking about something as a minimum viable product as opposed to ideal state, those kind of meetings lead to healthy discussions with people at the highest level and people who are on the ground, you know, producing the work every day. But yeah, that's been my experience so far.
Excellent, thank you. Kind of the next question, this won't be a little quick one. How does your team define success, and how do you celebrate the team wins on your projects? So let's start with Eric.
Yeah, so I think with this one, it's something that like really ends up being defined by the culture of the company you're at. I've had ones where it's like, finish this, move right on to the next thing and just keep going. You know, there's a lot of clients in the queue to work on. But I think like currently with where I'm at, it's a lot of recognition that happens. And it's this kind of like sit down and understanding of like everyone played a role in this, even like just people who were in feedback sessions or brainstorming sessions. We really view that as like a collaborative effort. And I think we kind of just have this ongoing acknowledgement of like, you know, here's a win, or here's how this person helped with this. And I kind of I really like that because there's always this sort of undertone of like, here are the successes we're having as a team, even if they're really small things, like the smallest, like, oh, we made this icon look a lot better, even to like the big thing where we've launched this whole new feature that took months to work on. And I think like just having that underpinning of like small successes throughout everything really kind of helps the vibe just feel a little bit more like upbeat, and that recognition is important for team members. So like just kind of keeping that constant roll of it is really important.
Yeah, no, I love that. This will be a side question. For when you've been a solo designer, how have you managed that, celebrating your wins?
That is a tough one.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm very bad at celebrating my own wins. But I think it's a lot of like just this idea of, even if it's something really small, like I'm gonna go buy myself a nice lunch, or like I haven't been a sole designer in a while, but
Yeah.
it was just a lot of like, I would actually have to put time in my schedule and be like, remember you did the thing.
Nice. Cool. No, I think that's very important. In the interest of time, I'm going to jump to the last question so we can also get some questions from the audience. So kind of the last question is a big one. How do you manage difference of opinions? And do you have any tips for navigating working across so many disciplines? So we're going to start with Ankit.
Oh, that's a
Big
spicy
one.
one. So difference in opinion. Again, I feel like it's difference of opinion amongst different levels. Obviously, if me and a researcher or me designers, we're not aligned on whether a feature is going to add value to the user, I think that difference of opinion can be, you can create a hypothesis, you test it, validate, validate the hypothesis from the findings. And that's a way that I think I'd be able to work around the difference of opinion at a level that I feel like this is a healthy discourse within my designer or designer developer relationship. But then the difference of opinion sometimes even happens at a level higher than you. And that's the more challenging one, because sometimes all you can do is present your best case along with the risks involved for why doing a thing or not doing something might not be an optimal outcome for the user that we're building this for. So as long as even if things, I don't want to say things don't go your way, but if the decision is made so that it's not aligned with what your recommendation were, having those risks associated with the decision outlined in a RAID log or something, it's a good way for the team to reflect back on something and kind of learn from it. But yeah, that's what I think I've done in the past.
Excellent. Next, let's have Marie. How do you manage a difference of opinions and any techniques or strategies you employ?
So for me, I think everything I do, I have like this internal framework, right? So I'm just going to share what my internal framework is. So first, it's really making sure that I have all the right people together, right? So whether it's in a room or whether it's on a call, making sure we know who all the people, because I'm a big believer in, if we don't have all the right people, then we're just wasting time, right? So have everybody there that needs to be part of making this decision, understanding what everyone's perspective is, because I think having all those people there and hearing everybody speak, I think we all come in with a lot of different perspectives. We all come in with a lot of different opinions. When everybody is in a room, hearing everybody out, it gets to the point where it's like, okay, now I'm going to have a little bit more empathy to understand why someone really feels strongly about, going one way or another. And then the next piece is really making sure that we understand like who's the ultimate decision maker, right? So we could go in a room and we could battle it out and not really know who the decision maker is. And then we're just going to be arguing with one another. So it's really about making sure that we come in with like this goal in mind that we're gonna solve whatever problem this is, whatever decision this is, and we're doing it together, we're doing it as a team. And there is a final decision maker at the end. And if we have to agree to disagree, then we're all agreeing that this person is going to make this decision. So I'll give a quick example that I'm working with real time right now. So we're working on a product. We're trying to figure out like the release schedule. We're trying to figure out if we should optimize for speed or if we should optimize for user experience. Engineering is really pushing for optimizing for speed and pushing incremental releases. And while I love that, our end user are restaurants, and change management for restaurants, figuring out how to change their workflow, they can't have those changes like every couple of weeks. That's too disruptive to their workflow. So you know, we talked it out, we hashed it out. While it's a huge accomplishment to be able to push a feature out pretty quickly and then push something out soon after that, I strongly advocated, no, we need to package this up so we can present, here is like a full defined feature. Let's have all the training that you need. And that way we're only impacting, you know, your workflow just once as opposed to multiple times. So in that scenario, you know, product was the one with the most influence in that scenario because, you know, I had the background in terms of like what it would look like from the impact to the user. So again, it's about understanding, you know, what you're trying to solve for, and then understanding who's ultimately going to make that decision and being okay with that, even though not everybody may agree.
I love that. Yeah, and I think it's really important to have that kind of framework so you're just kind of prepared right off the bat. That's really cool. All right, Eric, how do you manage difference of opinions, and what are your strategies?
I think understanding perspectives, to Marie's point, tends to be my starting point on things. And what I found in my own experiences, there have been plenty of times where, you know, I might be boots on the ground in user research, and I have all of this information that has come in from these interviews with users and just talking with them. And, you know, I've collected all of this. I've sat in those conversations. I have all of that top of mind. Other people might not have all that information. So it's really easy for me to like summarize this research and share that with them. And there are points that can be missed. So like from a perspective standpoint, like the first thing I'm like, okay, well, you know, is this coming from somewhere because, you know, someone didn't share the information that they had, or they thought they had, or it hadn't been communicated? Because I've noticed like that can be a very huge thing when a difference of opinions comes up in my work. The other thing could be like, if let's say I'm talking to someone that's, you know, higher up in the company and that's more of a high level decision maker, it's possible like something shifted at that level and that missed getting communicated down. And that might change how I need to reframe the problem I'm solving. So for me, it's a lot of just kind of everyone putting all the pieces on the table and figuring out what has shifted and like what priorities have moved around. And I think like that really kind of helps realign things. So generally speaking, I feel like that has worked pretty well for me. I think just that clear and open communication, and again, creating that collaborative environment where someone can come and say, hey, I don't think that this is, you know, being handled the best way because of X, Y, and Z, and having those open discussions. So in the end, like we're going to get better outcomes for that.
No, I think that's really huge. All right, so those are all the questions I had for the panel. Let's go to the chat. So we have a question from Olivia. What skills did you have to learn as a PM to evolve from being a PM in a small company to a PM in a larger company like Yelp? This was directed towards Marie.
Oh, good question, Olivia. Let's see. I think the skills that I had to really, find within myself are really when, and it kind of sounds silly, but when you're in a startup space, there's pretty much no rules. You're pretty much doing whatever you want all the time. So going into a larger company, there's a lot more process, there's a lot more framework, there's just a lot more rigor that you have to kind of get into, and understanding like what that culture of of the company is, and what their process and framework is, I think was something that I had to learn. A lot of it also is how to be patient. Again, when in a smaller company, you can move so much more faster. When you're in a larger company, it takes a little while, right? Because there are several layers that you may have to run certain decisions by. You just can't do things as quickly as possible. So I would say, yeah, patience and like really learning frameworks that are already set, and then figuring out how to actually marry what you know and what's already there. Because I've been in a lot of startup spaces where I've put process in place, right? So I'm used to kind of helping define. So really figuring out how to partner with folks that have been there for a while to figure out, okay, can we actually make this process better? Or is the process, that's the process, and things are all good, right? So yeah, that's my answer.
Awesome. Next question I have is from Wig. They asked, how do you explain a value on products whose ROI is more long-term versus immediate? And so I'll start with Ankit, but Eric, Marie, if you have any thoughts as well, feel free to jump in.
Would you mind repeating that question to me,
Yes.
Nick, please?
Of course. How do you explain value on products whose ROIs are more long-term as opposed to immediate?
That's a good question. So products that have a return over the long term, I think it's inherently we want like immediate results. A lot of like, management level people want to see results that are almost, how do we grow our user base or whatever the goal of the product is. I think that understanding or that expectation has to be clearly communicated from the very beginning. When starting to define a vision for the product, that this isn't going to be something that returns results immediately. I think that understanding being set at the foundation level of that project or product would be crucial in how everyone aligns their expectations of what kind of journey the teams are going to have to go through to get to that goal.
And I think that's really important. Thank
And
you.
if I could just jump in really quick, I think another thing to kind of call out is defining the milestones within that journey, right? So if we know that it's going to take a year to ship something out, really saying, okay, at every quarter, we're going to have some type of celebration or some type of just like pause to understand like, okay, here's all the progress that we did. Because I think while we could have like weekly retros and things like that, there's something about coming together at certain milestones to have a celebration about things. So that builds the momentum to keep going from quarter to quarter to get to that like end result at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think like adding on to what Ankit and Maria said, in most cases, like you're not creating this solution in a vacuum. It's in a lot of cases, like it's a product ecosystem, right? Like you have this solution fit into an ecosystem. And while that return you might be a long time to get that return on it, it's possible too that like there are other things affected sooner by this product that could yield a quicker return. Even if it's things like, I've worked at places where we've had call centers and the system that the call center representatives are using are extremely slow. So going between calls takes forever. Getting something to load when they're trying to work with the customer takes forever. And even just speeding those times up. So like it resulted in them being able to handle more calls and getting better quality of that. But it also resulted in better representative satisfaction. And their jobs were less stressful. They weren't sitting there waiting on a call for 5 minutes, for something to load to give them the information to submit something. And I think like there's usually more than sort of one outcome that is being affected. And so I think making time to like look at those aspects of it as well, or even like, in the solving of this problem, what else have we learned that we can apply to other issues that we're having? And I think it's kind of like really keeping in mind that like it's an ecosystem. It's not just, you know, one individual thing.
Awesome. Thank you. Last question. This won't be super quick because we're at time. What are some of the skills that a hiring manager, in your opinion, are looking for from a junior product designer? This was directed towards Marie, but Eric, Ankit, if you had any quick thoughts, I'd love to hear it. And then that's all I have.
I'll actually defer to Eric and Ankit because they're the design folks.
Excellent.
I mean, I've been on the hiring side of the interview table once or twice as part of a panel, and I think the most important thing that the decision makers were looking for in, you know, hiring a junior designer is their way of approaching the problem solving, the way they're able to communicate what their thought process was. I don't think there is as big of an emphasis on the tools because the tools keep changing. It's mainly an individual's ability to collaborate. And one of the questions that you asked earlier, Nick, was how do they handle a difference in opinion? Are they going to be a person that's going to be difficult for the team to work with? I think a lot of those factors kind of factor into their decision making. And in my experience, it's been less so the tools that they use. So be humble, be willing to learn, be willing to adapt to the team and the processes of the team that you're working on. Those are some of the traits that I would say a hiring manager would be looking for.
Yeah, I agree pretty strongly with everything Ankit said. I think just in general, like a healthy curiosity, openness, and I think it is that understanding of like, there are things that like, you know, when someone new comes onto the team and it's, you know, let's say that it's a junior level, their kind of first job or second maybe, like there are things that it's very easy to mentor someone on, like, here's how to use this software, here are the tools we use, here are some methodologies we've been implementing, or here are some processes. But then there are things that are a lot harder to mentor someone on that are gonna take more time. So things like, you know, encouraging people to have that curious mindset. Like if you come to the table with that already and that openness and that willingness to collaborate, I think like that kind of puts you a step ahead, because, you know, you'll learn and improve upon your design work over time. You'll learn new tools, you'll learn to develop processes. But I think you just have to be open to learning those things, and that makes it, you know, that makes it a lot more engaging when we bring someone new on the team and they're, you know, just ready to be part of the team.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. We appreciate the GEMS panel. I'm sure everyone left with a lot of information. We are at time, so I'm going to hand it over to Carmelina.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Nick. Thank you, Marie and Eric and Ankit. Really appreciate all of your time. Really great call outs for everybody on the line. So thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to share my screen quickly and we will just get everyone kind of up to speed here on the agenda. So we have Marty and Olivia will be up next for their fireside chat. And we're going to take a quick break, 10 minutes, and then we will come back. All right, so see you all in 10.